Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a literal ticking time bomb in the real estate world. We are unpacking the hidden math that's currently threatening affordable housing across the country. We're going to introduce you to the real estate finance metrics that are, right this very second, causing massive valuation challenges and pushing vital community properties right to the brink of foreclosure.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with some simple lemonade stand math. Then we'll cover valuing real estate assets, the interest rate effect, the cap rate conundrum, physical versus economic occupancy, and finally, strategies for survival.
Section 1. The lemonade stand math. Okay, let's break this down with an analogy that absolutely everyone understands.
The foundational metric we need to understand first is net operating income, or NOI. Basically, it's the profit you've got left over after paying your daily expenses. It's just your total income generated by property minus the operating expenses it takes to keep it running. Simple enough, right? Picture this. You've got a lemonade stand. Every day you rake in $100 in sales. But, you gotta buy lemons, sugar, cups. Let's say those expenses cost you $40. Subtract that 40 from your 100, and your net operating income, your profit, is $60.
Now for the second vital piece of the puzzle, the capitalization rate, or just cap rate. This is literally just the expected annual return an investor wants to make on an investment property. It's a ratio, calculated by taking the NOI and dividing it by the property's value.
So, to tie it back to our example, if I offer to sell you that exact same lemonade stand for $1,000, and we already know it spits out $60 a year in profit, you are getting a 6% return on your investment. Boom, you're buying it at a 6% cap rate. That percentage is the ultimate yardstick real estate investors use to size up a deal.
Section 2. Valuing real estate assets. Now, let's take those lemonade concepts and scale them way up to multi-million-dollar apartment buildings. Figuring out the NOI for a massive building is really just 3 steps. Step 1, you tally up your total income, rents, maybe parking fees. Step 2, you subtract operating expenses like maintenance, insurance, management fees, and property taxes. But here's the kicker in Step 3. You absolutely exclude mortgage payments and income taxes. NOI is strictly about the building's operational cash flow. And this brilliantly illustrates the golden rule of real estate. Your property's value? It's entirely dictated by this simple formula, dividing its NOI by the cap rate. If your NOI goes up, your building's value goes up. If your NOI drops, the value drops right along with it. So, who actually decides this cap rate? Well, the investors do. As outlined by Talimar Financial, investors decide what return they're willing to accept based on a few key factors. They look at location. A prime location might command a lower cap rate because it's safer. They look at the property type, overall market conditions, and the risk and quality of the tenants. A safer bet means they'll accept a lower return. A riskier bet, they're absolutely going to demand a higher return.
Section 3. The interest rate effect. Okay. What happens when the whole economic environment shifts abruptly?
This leads us to the multi-million-dollar question. Why on earth have cap rates shot up so dramatically in recent years, causing widespread panic for property owners across the nation?
The answer is in the timeline. Think back to 2020 and 2021. We were living in an era of incredibly low interest rates. It was a hugely favorable environment for buying and refinancing. But look at what happens between 2022 and 2025. Interest rates more than doubled. When banks charge more to lend money, buyers who are financing properties need the property to earn more just to cover their loans. Because borrowing costs more, they simply can't survive on a 5 or 6% return anymore. They demand a higher return, which pushes cap rates up across the entire board.
Let's look at how wild this shift actually is in practice. Imagine an identical building earning $300,000 in NOI. Under the old math, at a 6% cap rate, that building is worth $5 million. But under the new math, if buyers demand an 8% cap rate to cover their pricier loans, that exact same property, earning that same $300,000, is now worth just $3.75 million.
As SVN commercial real estate advisors point out, $1.25 million in value is just wiped out instantly. The building didn't change, the tenants haven't changed, the bricks are the same. But the math changed. Your original loan was written based on the old math, but if you need to refinance today, the bank is using the new math. That massive gap in value is exactly what creates an imminent foreclosure risk.
Section 4. The cap rate conundrum. And here's where it gets really tough, because this brutal math specifically targets and punishes the affordable housing sector.
Let's compare them side by side.
According to data from Housing Forward Virginia and Valbridge Property Advisors, market-rate housing generates higher rental income with standard operating costs, which leads to lower, safer cap rates, say around 5.5% in Richmond. But affordable housing? By law, the rents are restricted, yet they face much higher operating expenses. They've got to pay for intensive property management, supportive services, and annual financial audits that start at $5,000 just to stay in compliance. Lower income plus higher costs equals a lower NOI. Because of this perceived risk and the limited upside, investors demand a higher cap rate, often a full 1 to 2 percentage points higher, like 7% in Richmond.
Section 5, Physical versus Economic Occupancy. Let's see how this builds into an even more precarious situation on the ground.
As those SVN advisor communications highlight, there's a massive critical difference between physical occupancy and economic occupancy. Physical occupancy just asks, hey, are there people living in the apartments? Does the building look full? But economic occupancy asks the real question. Are those people actually paying rent? Are you actually collecting the money?
In affordable housing, you might have 100% physical occupancy, but because of delayed government subsidy payments, non-paying tenants, or high turnover, your economic occupancy might only be 70%. And listen, you can only spend the money you actually collect, so notice this chain reaction. Lower economic occupancy directly equals lower NOI. Lower NOI directly equals lower property value, and lower property value equals massive loan risk. When lenders look at your property, they honestly don't care about physical occupancy. They only care about economic occupancy.
Section 6, Strategies for Survival. With the clock rapidly running out, let's talk about solutions. The harsh reality is that once a lender begins the foreclosure process, a housing board loses all control. They don't pick the buyer, and they can't protect the residents. To survive this mathematical crisis, developers and boards have got to move fast. Communities need to utilize layered financing, stacking up tax credits, grants, and soft loans. They need to seek out mission-driven capital, finding impact investors who are willing to accept a slightly lower return for the social good. They can implement operating subsidies or green building efficiency measures to boost that all-important NOI. And they absolutely must lean heavily into programs like the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, or LIHTC, to restructure ownership and bring in fresh equity. As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with one pressing thought. The buildings themselves haven't changed at all, but the math has fundamentally shifted. When the underlying financial math turns against us like this, how will your community step up, act quickly, and bridge the gap to prevent these vital properties from being lost to foreclosure? It's a completely solvable problem, but only for those who understand the math and move before the clock runs out. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep questioning the numbers behind the world around you.